I'm Samantha Rush. You might remember me from such podcasts as Marvellous Women, the podcast, and also I'm the founder of Marvellous Women Cards. Doing this podcast is absolutely one of the joys of my life. And in this episode, I'm very happy to bring you the conversation that I had with Sinead Houston. In this episode, Sinead talks about how she became a loud and colourful person who takes up space. Enjoy. Welcome to Marvellous Women, the podcast. And today on this episode, we have the wonderful Sinead Houston. Thank you so much for being here, Sinead.
Thank you for inviting me along.
I think I pretty much insisted. It was less of an invitation, more of a forced volunteering, because I'm really excited to talk with you. We used to work together many years ago. We haven't seen each other for a little time, so this is a really great way to learn about what you've been up to and what's going on. So let's get right into it. Sinead, who are you? Tell us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And when I started thinking about how do I answer that question of who I am, I went into a little bit of a path of an overthinking because that's what I do like to do. And I started to think about what are the things that we define ourselves as? And there's those like real demographic style answers. So I'm a woman who's in her 40s. I live in Brisbane. I'm university educated. I'm divorced. Then there's the things about our jobs and our career that I started to think about as well, and how intertwined our jobs become with our sense of self and who we are as a person.
Mm,
But they're not the things that I really want to be how I define myself. So when I stop and think about how I define myself, I think about that I am someone who spent way too much of her time and made way too much of her life trying to shrink herself down. And that was
mm,
both a physical shrinking and sort of more metaphorical shrinking.
mm.
And I sort of wasn't my authentic self for a long time. And that really made me a very, very unhappy person. And then I made a decision and I made a change. And 7 years ago, I signed up for my first ever novice powerlifting competition.
Amazing.
And everything changed. And I became a different version of myself who was who I am, who is my authentic self. So I became this loud, colorful, determined woman who just wanted to take up space and didn't want to shrink anymore and wanted to be who I was supposed to be all those years. So when I think about what you said when we used to work together, that was that other Sinead. That was the old Sinead who
Mm.
I won't be anymore. And who I am now is who I am. I'm someone who loves to drink iced black coffee. I love chocolate ice cream. And I am going to take up space.
I can't even begin to say how much I absolutely love that. And I was thinking when you were, starting to answer that question, thinking about, well, who am I versus two alternative questions, which are, how do I define myself? And
Mm,
then another question, which is, what do I actually want to be known for? What do I want to be
mm,
remembered as? And I
yeah,
think that's a real mind shift on that question, because you're right, we define ourselves in these different boxes, and that actually
yeah.
maybe it's a bigger question.
It is, and it's three words, who are you? But it does really ask that of you to think deeper about what are those things that are your sense of self and are the things that you want to bring to the front when you're meeting people, when you're introducing yourself, when you're defining your place in the world and what
Mm.
what you want to leave the world when you go. And yeah, we so often, I know when you meet new people, you always ask them about what do you do? What's your job? Or, do you have kids? Or, those sorts of questions, but they really don't get down deep into what's the makeup of this person? What makes this person tick? And that's one of the things that I love to find out about people when I'm meeting them, and particularly like in my work world and stuff like that, because it just becomes so much deeper and such a more thorough understanding of the person,
Mm.
to then really be able to go how do I interact with this person, or what are the things that I want to, if you're negotiating or you're motivating people, what are the things you want to leverage when you're building on that, as opposed to those more simple surface level definitions that we tend to fall into.
So I'm curious if you, I mean, I've already got a load of questions I want to ask you, but I'm curious if you have any kind of, if you've moved from that surface level question when you meet someone like, so, what do you do? Whether you
Mm.
have other questions that you will generally start with to try and kind of get through those layers.
Yeah, I'm I'm inherently bad at small talk. So I've kind of got my little dictionary of small talk that I will rely on in more those social settings. So it's, those sorts of surface level questions. But then I try and like latch onto something that someone will say. So oftentimes if I'm talking with somebody and they mention a hobby or they mention a book that they've read, I start to ask more questions about that. So if it's a book that they've read, I want to talk about, what was the most enjoying thing about the book? What other books that they read that are similar? I'm a bookworm, so I love to learn about, what books are out there and what people are reading. Or if it's about a hobby, how did you get into that? What was the journey that you went on? And
Mm.
and that for me is very personal as well, because what was my hobby has become such a important part of my life and has changed who I am so much that I feel like if I'm going to have that relate to people, finding about that and digging that bit deeper might really
Yeah.
open that up.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I'm curious to know, you mentioned that it was about 7 years ago that you kind of made a decision that you weren't going to be that shrinking Sinead anymore. You
Mm,
were going to
mm,
be your loud, colorful, uh, and I can't read that last word. Loud, colorful, and something person. The,
yes.
the new Sinead, the real Sinead.
Mm,
Will the real
mm,
Sinead please stand up?
absolutely.
And I'm curious to know, like, what was the switch for you
Mm,
that got flicked that you just kind of, went, hang on, I need to stand up.
yeah. It wasn't as simple as I signed up for this competition and then the new me was suddenly there.
It never is. Yeah.
It's been a long process and a lot of years. I think it was to start with signing up for that competition. It was a point in my life where I was very unhappy. I had very, very low self-esteem.
Mm.
I, didn't really see that I was able to sort of pushed myself forward, and talking with a friend who suggested signing up for the competition was that first step. And I went into it and I was absolutely petrified of what I was doing and what I was thinking. But it's one of those things that I had called back to in other circumstances and when I was talking to other people about that you can't get that true success and that true progress if you stay in the comfort. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable to be able to push
Mm.
that forward. So taking that leap of signing up to that competition, doing the training and turning up on the first day, on the competition day, they were just small pieces. It was then being exposed to powerlifting and the things that it started to teach me about myself and what I could do, but then also the community that I got through powerlifting. So those two things really sort of became this force that helped me to start to take those steps that I really wanted to
Mm.
take. So novice powerlifting, sorry, powerlifting itself and doing that first competition taught me things like, you need to build discipline, you need to be resilient, you need to be uncomfortable to get success. Um, and then getting exposed to this community of people who were on that same sort of journey in terms of the training and the work that you do behind the scenes to get to a competition day. But also, I suddenly found all these people who were really like me in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of that, sort of personable pieces that I could start to build on, but also had this real diverse backgrounds. So this real diversity of experience of their stories, of their progress. And probably one of the biggest standouts was the number of women. that were there. So the first sanctioned competition I did, so after doing sort of the novice level, then the competitors that were there, I think it was like about 100 competitors, and about a half of them were women. And so
Mm,
walking in there and going, wow, there's so many women here, and starting to hear their journeys and their stories and their experiences and see what they were able to do and what they were pushing themselves, particularly pushing out of that status quo of what we expect of women, was
mm,
a real eye opener for me to go, hang on, I can do this too. Maybe I can start to take these steps and be like this, or be recognizing later, be who I'm
mm,
supposed to be, who my authentic self
mm,
is.
mm. I'm really curious. Is it you're you're bringing up a lot of curiosity in me today, Sinead. I'm really curious, kind of, how, because I think if you haven't done any kind of lifting before, it can
Mm,
be really intimidating, and sometimes the idea of lifting, a particular weight or even a particular piece of equipment can be just
mm,
so overwhelming, and we can kind of psych ourselves out. How
mhm,
have you found your journey of not psyching yourself out when it comes
mm,
to
mm.
either lifting a specific weight or doing something new? Because I think it's what we all do. And
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
you need to be able to just kind of less thinky, more doy. So how do you do that?
Mm. It's a really interesting one. I think when I talked before about like building that discipline and that resilience, that's definitely a big part of it. So having the discipline to keep showing up even when it's hard or when it's getting
Mm,
really heavy, is a really important part of it. And a lot of people talk about, or when they talk to me about lifting, they talk about how do I motivate myself? What's my motivation? And I feel like motivation's too fragile for a lot of these
mm,
things. And it becomes that you create that discipline. So I might not want to do something that day, but I've got the discipline that I'm going to have to keep doing it. And then you have to couple that with that resilience. So it might be hard. I might fail. I might not get the lift that I wanted to do, but I've got to be resilient enough to get back up and to have another go at it. And so when it's those times where I'm faced with something where I think, and I've got that doubt of, I'm not going to be able to lift this, or I'm not going to be able to do this. It's looking back to that and going, well, 7 years ago when I started, what I'm doing now was a pipe dream. There was no way I thought I would ever get to this stage, but here I am now, and I've added all this extra numbers to what I'm lifting. Then also who I am as a person, I've added all this extra to who I am as a person.
mm,
And we know things like exercise gives endorphins. So we get the little mood boosts. So those nudges of those sorts of things all coming in together to help with that push to go forward and to keep trying and to make myself better each
mm.
time.
I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm curious again as
Mm,
to, I mean, you acknowledge that you don't always want to do the things that you need to do. You don't always
mm,
want to have the discipline to be able to show up, when you're feeling
mm.
tired, or you've had a big week, and the last thing you want to do on a Saturday morning is drag yourself into the gym. What's the conversation you have with yourself, Sinead, to kind of get back into your discipline,
Mm.
and to kind of get your head back in the game?
Yeah, there's a lot of reflection. So I know for myself, if I'm not going to the gym, if I don't do the exercises, then I start to have those physical responses of, the lack of the endorphin rush, the
Mm,
lack of the feeling of, that I'm taking those steps to be successful, that I'll start to feel like an actual physical response to that. So there's a bit of that reflection on, if I don't do this, I'm actually going to feel worse. So right now, I might feel tired, or I might feel, a bit bruised because I've had a big couple of sessions this week training and I'm really feeling it physically. But if I don't, I'm going to feel worse. So that's
mm,
a big push for me. And I like to think that I'm able to also then bring that into the other parts of my life. And that's probably like a really important part of this, that training for powerlifting and getting into that world has flowed through to so much else in my life. It's not just about the gym time, it's not just about the competitions. It's about how I present myself as a person, how I, succeed in my career, how I succeed in my relationships. All of those other things have started to play into it and to come from that discipline and resilience and that ability to get back up and to keep going and to set those goals and to have those plans. All of those things have then flowed into other parts of my life as well. So I can take the success that I get in the gym or in competition and bring that into who I am.
And I love that mindset around understanding transferability of confidence almost, really, isn't it? And that, that
100%.
having your own back. And I think that can also
Mm,
work in the opposite, that if you don't have confidence in one part of your life, actually it can kind of
mm,
it's almost like a contagion. Um,
mm.
and so it can either be a really good effect, and it can kind of share and transfer across other parts of your life, or it can be contagious and kind of infect other parts of your life as well.
Yeah.
I'm really keen to hear if you've got any kind of stories or examples of how, kind of that mindset and the lessons that you've learned in powerlifting have transferred into other parts of your life. I know you kind of touched on it very briefly, but I'd love to
Mm.
hear a couple, a couple of stories.
Yeah. Wow. Now I'm going to have to think a bit.
Don't overthink, just
No,
like it.
yeah, no, don't overthink. Yeah. I think definitely like career wise and how I've been able to create and evolve my what I can do in the workplace is definitely a part of it. So you talked about confidence, and it's definitely given me that voice to be confident in the workplace and in my career and in conversations with my peers and my colleagues and then with other people in work to go I actually know or actually have some good experiences and I can talk about them and I can bring them to the front. So that that side of it of having that confidence to then go in and go I can do this. What might have felt, at another time to be something that I couldn't achieve in the workplace or a step in too far to where I was at. I've got that confidence to back myself more and to make my voice heard. Um, but then also that resilience. Like I've in the time that I've been doing this, I've had redundancies. I've had contracts wrap up that I wasn't expecting to wrap up. I've had to change jobs that I wasn't expecting to change.
Mm,
Or I've, had unsuccessful periods in my work where I haven't been able to achieve what I thought I wanted to achieve. So it's that resilience to then go, all right, that's happened. What do I take from this? What are the lessons that I can take from this to move into the next
mm,
spot? And
mm,
how do I dust myself off and keep going?
mm. How and for those things, how do you think old Sinead would have responded in those circumstances with those examples that you've just given us?
Yeah, that sort of the the unhappiness and the depression and those sorts of things make you almost immobile.
Mm,
So when you get those sorts of blows, it then is another thing that brings down onto that inability to move forward.
mm,
So I think that the old Sinead, and I know because the old Sinead had to go through some of those things. So the old
yeah.
Sinead would have, taken the negative sort of side of it. So thought about, this has happened. I can't control it. I can't change it. Whereas the new one will still say that it's happened. I had no control over this happening, but what can I do to keep going forward? So what's the
Yeah.
next thing that I can do? And it very much is those lessons that I take from that. And I do this in my training and then I do it in my outside of training world. So if something hasn't gone right, why didn't it go right? Or if it hasn't
Mm,
gone to the plan, why hasn't it gone to the plan? What are the lessons that I can take from that? And then what do I change next time? Or what do I
mm,
alter? What do I need to do earlier that I didn't do? Or how do I fix this plan and adjust it? And it creates that agility in you as a person to be able to respond to those things and not stop. because that's the worst thing. Like I fail if I don't keep trying. So I need to not stop and keep going. So what do I take from this that I can use next time?
I really love that. And it's almost, I love a good metaphor and a visualization. If it's and it's almost like if there's quicksand and you stop,
Mm,
you're going to sink.
yeah,
Whereas if you
exactly.
try to keep moving, you actually have a better chance of making through it.
Mm,
There's
mm,
that whole mindset about failure.
mm,
We had a guest on the podcast a few episodes ago who talked about failure being what success smells like. And I think from a powerlifting perspective, and even just from a baby weightlifting perspective, which is me, when I fail, it's kind of like, yeah, I absolutely pushed my hardest on that. And, this is
mm,
really good because it means that I've set a new kind of foundation. It means that my muscles are
mm,
growing. It means that I've absolutely pushed and done the best that I can with that particular thing. And next
mm,
time it's going to be better. And so that
mm,
whole, oh, I couldn't lift it turns to actually, I really pushed it here. When you do, I
mm.
actually had that this morning. I did two and my body just went, nah. And I went,
You're
that's
done.
okay. That's okay. My
Yeah,
body's done and is confident knowing that I did my best and
yeah,
my body just told me no. And I think that
yeah,
whole mindset change of what is failure is
yes,
so
yeah.
important. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I like to say I'm not scared of failure. I don't want to fail. I don't like failing, but
No.
I'm not scared of it because failing is a lesson and is something that we can take from.
Mm,
And it's funny that you talk about, when you've pushed yourself in any facet in life, when you've pushed yourself to that absolute limit and you're like, I can't go any further. I think there's also a reflection that we don't do enough of going, did I push myself or did
mm,
I pull back? And I've got a training partner who will love that I'm talking about this because she has said that to me. Like, and this is that community that I've got. It's not just all the, people who are lovely and nice. That's definitely part of it, but it's also those people who will challenge you. And I want to surround myself with people who will challenge me. And she
mm,
does this where I go, I can't, I fail something and I go, oh, I just couldn't do it. She's like, could you not do it or did you not try hard enough? And it's that stopping and going, yeah, actually, I think I was holding myself back there. I think there
mm,
was more that I could do and I didn't do it. And it's
mm,
that reflection again in all facets of my life to go, did I actually try hard enough or did I
mm,
just hold myself back? And that's where
mm.
that, and again, that comes to, that standing still is where you then start to fail because you're not going, have I challenged myself enough here?
Where do you think is the border between that kind of healthy, I probably didn't push myself, and actually kind of not listening to yourself and pushing yourself harder than you actually
Mm,
should because the voice in your head is telling you you're lazy or you're stupid or that voice.
yep,
So
I know that voice.
where's the balance between that recognition that actually, yeah, I probably could have done a little bit more. And even that question of, you know, did you really do your best or did you just think that you did? I think you had a
Yeah.
couple more in the tank. So how like where does that line become toxic, I suppose?
Yeah. That's a
Sorry,
great
I
question.
know I'm asking
Yeah.
like these are all totally off script for the
Yeah.
listeners.
And I don't know if I have the answer to that. I think that one's a bit, bigger than my
Yeah.
capabilities, but then maybe I'm not pushing myself hard enough. I think,
Hey, I
yeah.
love that. I love that. Well played.
I think for myself, it's that reflection and learning and knowing what's the difference between I gave it absolutely everything. There was nothing left in the tank, or I pulled back a bit. And that's I'm going to be constantly learning that. I think that's the other thing that I've really reflected on in the last however many years of going on this journey is I'm always going to be learning. I'm never going to hit that pinnacle. I'm always going to be learning about anything in my world. So if it's lifting, if it's my work, if it's what books I'm going to read, there's always going to be something that I'm learning that I'm going to have to do new that I want to keep pushing towards. So I
Mm.
think that's kind of I don't have the answer of when that line moves into the toxic side, But I do think that it's for each person is understanding and starting to recognize those things in ourselves and
Mm.
thinking about our mindsets and how we approach things and how we want to be known and be recognized, and then working out, okay, well, this is where it is right now. In 6 months it's probably going to be a different line, so how do I then recognize it in 6 months?
It's like almost being like harsh but fair, firm but
Mm,
kind,
mm,
of helping yourself push you, when you're standing still in that quicksand,
mm.
but not trying to push you actually if you need to walk a little bit slower. The next question I was going to ask you is what drives you, but I think your answer, the kind of chat that we've just had answers that, but I'm keen to see if your answer is what I think it's going to be. So what is it that drives you? Because I mean, I can almost feel the drive
Mm.
through in your voice and even, some of your body language. What's behind that?
Part of it is definitely I don't want to go back to that old version. So that part of me, that existed then, I don't want to be that person again. So there's definitely a drive of I can't let things slip backwards. I need to keep going forward. But also recognizing that it's not linear. Like nothing
Mm,
in life is linear. It would be really nice and it would make my job a lot easier if everything was linear. But it isn't. So when I have those backward steps, again, how do I use that to then go forward again? So I think
mm,
that's definitely a big drive for me. I think it goes back to that who are you question as well. Like how do I want to be defined? How do I want to what's the mark that I want to leave? And if someone is talking about me in a room, how do I want them to talk about me? And
mm,
what are the things that come through? And actually in doing like sort of preparing for this, I put that question to a couple of friends and was like, how would you describe me? And learning about what is my persona at the moment and how people perceive me, through that question and going, yeah, that actually tracks. That's how I feel and how I want to be. But if the answers were different and they weren't tracking, I probably would be going, okay, how am I going to address this? What am I doing in my world and in my life, to change that? And I think that's the sort of things that drive me. It's also then that balance of I don't want I don't want just perceptions of me to be what drives me as well. So I
mm,
want to have, my mark. I want to have what defines me and how I'm known. But at the same time, I need to recognize that I have to find my own self-worth. I have to be the driver of my own self as well, and
mm,
my own understanding of who I am. So if it's not going to serve me, what do I look for differently? So if I'm not going to get a benefit from this, how do I change that or how do I address that so that I do get a benefit? And I feel like there's some parts of us that would feel that's inherently selfish, but we kind of are inherently selfish in the world. We need to fulfill ourselves. You need to, fill your own cup before you can drink from it, sort of thing. So,
mm.
um, and that becomes like a big driver of how do I feel myself?
Mm. That's a much better place, more holistic place than I had thought. So I'm really glad that I asked that question and got that, that fuller view of what drives.
Mm,
So
mm.
Sinead, if you looked up marvelous woman in the dictionary, whose face would you see and why?
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be a single face. I think
You can
that's
have two.
probably
That's okay.
you have to.
I'm
I
just
think there's
kidding.
way more than two. And I think about, my life right now and the community that I'm part of and the people who are in my life that are important to me, and the traits that they have and the things that they bring to those relationships and to those interactions. And they're the things that I'm going to look for and what I would see if I was looking up marvelous women. And I'm in such a fortunate position that I am surrounded by a hell of a lot of marvelous women these days. And like I talked about before, that diversity of experience, their different stories, the journeys that they've all been on, has inspired and driven me as well. So I think, I want to be what it is that I see as the traits of marvelous women. So I want to be proud of myself. I want to be have some degree of inspiration to others and help other people in that. I want to be my loud self. I want to be, that voice that won't be quietened, and that strength as well. So that's something like, and not just that physical strength, but I think that that physical strength has given me the opportunity to be strong in other ways. And I see that in these marvelous women that are in my life, that they're strong for so many different reasons and so many different things that have happened, or that they have gone down that path in their journey, that makes them strong. And that's what, to me, I would be looking for when I look up marvelous women.
I think that's one of my favorite answers to that question that I've heard. And what I particularly liked about it is that you referenced those qualities and wanting to embody those qualities in yourself. I think it
Mm,
was a few episodes ago when I said to I said to whoever was the guest, I'm waiting for the day when someone says the marvelous woman that I see is me.
mm, yeah. And I feel like that's such it's a thing that women do as well. Like, we try and downplay ourselves a lot. And this is like, it goes back to that person who was trying to shrink herself, but now wants to take up space. We downplay ourselves, so we don't want to be seen that we've got that ego, or that that audacity to be the one to go, I'm the marvelous woman. That's who it is. And there's so many reasons why we do that as women, and so much that is in the background to that. But I think that the person who does answer that is going to be my hero. The person who comes
Yeah.
on here and says, the marvelous woman I want to see is me, because that shifts that. And that's something that's really important to me, is pushing those boundaries,
Yeah.
challenging those status quos. And as women, that's something that, we kind of have to learn or practice, or change to do that. It's not something that we often do just as a natural thing. And I think that's going to be a really great answer when you get it.
I think so too. So, word to all the listeners who are interested in being guests on the podcast. This is how to get in all of our good books. I've got just a few other questions
Mm.
before I let you go. And the first one is like, do you have any kind of mottos that you find yourself kind of living by, and when
Mm.
either when you need to give yourself a pep talk, or just something that really resonates with you?
Yeah, take up space is a big one. And I actually have it tattooed on myself as a reminder
Can you
that
show us, or is it in a not safe for work place?
it's
Take
just
up
on my
space.
arm
I see
there.
it. Oh, that's fantastic. And I
So I
love that
can't,
it's somewhere you can see it.
yes, yeah, so I can look down on it, and that was a big reason for it. And I can't take credit for coming up with the idea. There is a strength sports, a woman in strength sports, who has it tattooed on herself. And I saw that and was like, that really speaks to me. That's the
Mm.
person that I was, didn't want to take up space. The person I want to be is someone who takes up space. So having it tattooed on myself is that constant reminder. And those times where I do want to start to shrink a little bit, I go, no, hang on a second. This is who you are. You are like a badass woman who needs to be taking up that space. So that's a big one. And I talk to people about that a lot. And I do some mentoring, and I talk about, you know, be the one that isn't afraid to be there and take up the space that you need to take. And however that is that you achieve that. The other ones are those things are like, we have to be comfortable with discomfort to be successful. No real change comes from that status quo, that place of comfort. And we see that in
Yes.
history, we see that in it, in the lives of people. It's not a nice and easy step forward. So it's definitely like those sorts of reflections. It is just it's such an important thing to keep moving ourselves forward, and that's it's our evolution of self, is getting uncomfortable and getting that evolution happening.
So, in line with what you have just said,
Mm,
if you were to meet old Sinead,
mm.
what advice would you give her? What would you say?
Oh gosh.
10 years ago, Sinead.
Yeah, 10 years ago, Sinead. And yeah, I've reflected on this, and there's those things that you hear talked about quite a bit of when people have made these big progresses in their lives or they've altered their paths, that there's that reflection on who you were. And part of that is a bit of regret and a little bit of mourning of what could have been if I didn't stay on the path that I was.
Mm.
But then it's also that moment of I can't lose that energy to mourning, and to regret, because again, that doesn't serve me. That doesn't help me move forward.
Mm.
Um, so I think about the Sinead that was and what I would say, and I think I would just be saying it does change. You do become who you're supposed to be. You do find those opportunities and those ways, and you find that community that helps to bring your authentic self to the front. And you start to understand who you are and what you can be. And you can start to get some of those answers to those big questions that felt so impossible and so difficult. And that were like these big hanging things over you of how do I move forward? How do I do this? And they're small steps, but they then start to avalanche, and you are a whole new person.
I love what you've just said, that they're small steps, but they start to avalanche.
Mm,
That's super cool. So if there's any other listeners to this who are curious to get into lifting and powerlifting,
mm.
how would you recommend they start?
Oh, I started by in my mid 30s joining a gym. I was not a sports kid. I didn't do lots of exercise as a kid, things like that. In my mid 30s, I joined a local gym and just started just with bodyweight stuff. And then somehow ended up on this crazy path into powerlifting. And 7 years later, I'm here. I'm, lifting for 7 years. I am, I hold multiple national records. Like, I've had all these achievements, but it's that first step, you know, if you're already in a gym and you want to start to push, go and have a look at the weights, talk to somebody who can help you out. When I talk about that community, it's not just those people that I'm friends with or that I have those, relationships with, but it's the people who know the stuff, the coaches, the trainers, the allied health that sits around it, all of that sort of thing. It's that whole, it takes a village. It takes a village to move into sort of competitive sports. And but it is that first step, and it's that drive in yourself to go, I'm going to do that. I'm going to get uncomfortable. It's not going to be pleasant. There's going to be sweat, there's going to be tears, there's going to be bruises, but you start that journey and you get uncomfortable and you start to see those changes and that success.
I absolutely love it. I have so enjoyed this chat. Sinead, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course, thank you. And thank you for pushing me to be uncomfortable and to come along and to do this and have that moment of self-reflection and go, you could just say no, but is that really going to be a path forward?
And how do you feel now that we're at the end? I mean, I'm still recording, but curious, how do you feel now that we're at the end of that and knowing that you got through alive of kind of
Yeah.
being in that in the hot seat? How's it feel?
It feels really good, and this is probably the first time that I've sat down and talked about and told this story in its sort of beginning to end. And obviously, there's a whole lot of chapters in there, and it would be a ridiculously long mini series that goes across multiple DVDs if I was. But it's the first time that I've really thought and had to reflect on and put into words that journey that I've taken. And it was exceptionally cathartic to do that, for one, but it also has made me stop and go, damn girl, you've done a lot. Like you've shifted a lot of your life in 7 years. And that 7 years in 40 plus years of life and the next 40 years that are going to happen. Um,
Yeah.
and and how I want to get to that, and
Yeah.
yeah, who I want that older Sinead to be as well. So yeah, it's actually been a really wonderful experience, and I thank you for pushing me, and I thank myself, and I thank the friends that I spoke to about it for going, this is who you are, and you can get to do this now as well.
Well, I think you talked about before, kind of what is that mark you want to leave, that you wanted, to help people and to, maybe be a little bit inspiring. And I think that probably everyone who listens to this episode is absolutely going to agree with me that you are a marvelous woman and you are super inspiring. And I think that, you absolutely need to, in the very, very least, pat yourself on the shoulder, maybe one on each shoulders, and just repeat what you said a couple of minutes ago, which was, damn girl,
Yeah.
you've come a long way
Yeah.
and well done.
Thank you. And thank you for providing me.
I hope that you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed the episode. So, Sinead, I have a message for you and a message for everyone who's listening. You are a badass woman who takes up space. So go forth and be you and be authentic and take up that space, damn it. Until next time, stay marvelous.